You've been eating honey your entire life, on toast, in tea, straight from the jar at 11 p.m. because you're an adult and no one can stop you. And if someone asked you why bees make honey, you'd probably say something like, because that's what bees do. You'd say it with total confidence, and you'd be slightly embarrassingly wrong, because bees don't make honey because it's their thing. They make it because without it, the entire colony dies. Here's what nobody tells you. Raw flower nectar is roughly 80% water. Store it as is, and it rots within days, completely useless. So bees don't collect nectar to store it. They collect it to transform it into something that cannot rot, cannot freeze solid, and can sit in a sealed container for 3,000 years and still be edible. That's not a stretch. Archaeologists found honey in an Egyptian pharaoh's tomb that was reportedly still good when they opened it. 3,000 years. Your jam lasts about 3 weeks in the fridge. So what is honey, actually? It's a highly concentrated sugar solution that bees manufacture from flower nectar, processed and stored as their main long-term food supply to survive winter when no flowers exist. It's not a condiment, it's not a sweetener invented for toast. It's a bee's version of canned food, stockpiled against a season when everything outside goes quiet and dies. But here's the weird part. The process that creates it is nothing like what most people picture. Most people think of honey as something bees simply produce, the way a cow produces milk, passively, naturally, almost automatically. The misconception formed because we only ever see the finished product in a jar, totally cut off from the reason it exists. You buy it at the store in a clean bottle with a bear-shaped lid. There are no bees involved, there's no context, so the brain fills in the gap with the simplest story. Bees make honey because bees make honey, but the real process is wild. A forager bee visits up to 1,500 flowers in a single trip, collecting nectar in a special second stomach, completely separate from the digestive stomach, called the honey stomach. One bee carries about 40 milligrams of nectar per trip. To fill a single jar of honey, bees make roughly 2 million flower visits. That's like every person in a mid-sized city each taking one step to move a couch 1 inch. During the flight home, enzymes in the honey stomach are already breaking down the complex sugars in nectar into simpler sugars, glucose and fructose, which are more stable and much harder for bacteria to feed on. The bee is doing chemistry on the commute home before it even lands. But here's where it gets crazy. Back at the hive, the forager passes the nectar to a house bee through a process of passing the liquid back and forth between bees, mouth to mouth, up to 20 times. Each pass adds more enzymes and removes more water through evaporation from the bee's mouth parts. By the time that liquid touches a honeycomb cell, it has been processed by dozens of bees. Next time you spread honey on toast, picture that. 20 bees, chewing, you're welcome. Even after all that, the nectar is still too watery to store safely. So house bees spread it across open honeycomb cells in thin layers and fan it rapidly with their wings, running a tiny evaporation factory inside the hive. The hive holds a steady temperature of around 95 degrees Fahrenheit, almost exactly human body temperature, which speeds things up. Water content drops from around 80% all the way down to below 20%. At that point, the sugar concentration is so high that almost no bacteria or mold can survive. Then bees seal each cell with a wax cap. That sealed cell is one of the most stable food storage systems ever built, by an insect with no tools. But why doesn't honey rot even after thousands of years? 3 reasons, all working together. First, extremely low water content means bacteria can't absorb enough moisture to survive. Second, extremely high sugar concentration pulls water out of any bacterial cell that tries to grow, killing it through a process called osmosis. Basically, the honey dehydrates the bacteria before they can do anything. Third, bees add an enzyme called glucose oxidase, which produces tiny amounts of hydrogen peroxide, a natural germ killer. Think of it as a triple lock on a door: low water, high sugar, and a chemical that actively kills microbes. That's why it lasts forever. The bee engineered it that way. Now here's something most people get wrong about bees. Not all of them make honey, or at least not in the way you'd recognize. Bumblebees and honeybees are both bees, but they solve winter completely differently. A honeybee colony is massive, 20,000 to 80,000 bees, and the whole colony survives winter together as one unit. That takes food, up to 60 pounds of stored honey to get through the cold months. That's the weight of a large dog sitting in a wooden box all winter needing to eat. Therefore, honeybees produce a huge surplus of honey, way more than they'd need in a warm year just to be safe. Bumblebees do the opposite. A bumblebee colony has maybe 50 to 400 bees. At the end of summer, the colony dies. All of it, except the queen, who burrows underground and hibernates alone through winter. The colony never needs to store serious food reserves because most of it won't survive to need them. Therefore, bumblebees produce a tiny honey-like substance, roughly a teaspoon's worth per colony total. 1 teaspoon. The jar in your pantry exists because honeybees have a winter survival problem that bumblebees just opted out of entirely. This is the part everyone misses. The same properties that make honey useful for a bee. Antimicrobial, shelf-stable, energy-dense, and hygroscopic, meaning it draws moisture toward itself, make it useful for a surprising number of things you already use and eat every day. Cough medicine and throat lozenges contain honey because its moisture-drawing and germ-fighting properties coat and soothe throat tissue. Several studies suggest it works as well as some over-the-counter cough medicines for mild symptoms. Medical-grade Manuka honey is used in clinical wound care for burns and skin ulcers. The hydrogen peroxide it produces, plus its low water content, creates an environment where bacteria simply cannot survive. Barbecue sauce and glazes use honey because its sugars caramelize at lower temperatures than regular sugar. And its moisture-pulling nature keeps meat surfaces from drying out. It's doing chemistry, not just sweetening. Face masks and skincare products use honey for the same moisture-pulling chemistry. Honey-based skincare is not a wellness trend. It's applied biology. Bread and baked goods with honey stay fresh longer because honey actively pulls moisture toward itself and slows the staling process. Commercial bakers use it specifically for this reason. Energy gels and sports nutrition products often use honey because glucose and fructose are rapidly absorbed simple sugars. Ancient Greek Olympic athletes consumed honey before competition for exactly this reason. It's one of the oldest performance fuels in recorded history. Mead, the world's oldest alcoholic drink, older than wine, older than beer in many cultures, is simply honey fermented with water. Honey naturally contains wild yeast on its surface, so fermentation is almost inevitable if you add enough water. Before refrigerators existed, people packed food in honey as a genuine long-term storage method. The same antimicrobial chemistry that protects the hive protects whatever you put inside it. Tea gets something from honey that it can never get from granulated sugar. Honey releases different flavor compounds depending on which flowers the bees visited, making every variety chemically distinct. Lip balms, moisturizers, and cosmetic products use honey's moisture-pulling chemistry in far more products than most people realize. Here's the honest part. The surplus that humans have been taking from bees for 8,000 years, the oldest known evidence of humans collecting honey, is a cave painting in Valencia, Spain, showing a figure on a rope ladder reaching into a wild nest in a rock face with bees swarming everywhere. That surplus is under real pressure right now. Colony collapse disorder, where worker bees abandon a hive suddenly and without obvious cause, has led to major hive losses since the mid-2000s. The causes are still being studied, but they likely involve pesticide exposure, habitat loss, a parasite called the varroa mite, and the loss of flower variety in large farming areas. You're probably thinking this is just an environmental concern, but actually the food connection is more direct than most people realize. Honeybees pollinate roughly 1/3 of the food crops humans eat, not just honey crops, but almonds, blueberries, avocados, cucumbers, and dozens of fruits and vegetables that need insect pollination to produce food at all. Therefore, the honey problem and the food supply problem are the same problem. The good news, keeping diverse flowering plants in yards and gardens, reducing pesticide use in residential areas, and buying from local beekeepers all have real, measurable, positive effects at the local level. Bees make honey to stockpile food for winter, not for toast, not for tea, not for you. The fact that it never rots, heals wounds, and tastes incredible is just a side effect of very good insect engineering. You've been eating a survival system this whole time.